So thanks for having us today. We're talking about applied mind styles, which I don't think has been done before, but it's nice to get an opportunity to discuss how mind styles might be applied in some awareness raising and reader response research that we're doing based at Queen's. So what I'm talking about today is based on a project that is 18 months long, and we're currently 12 months into it. It's funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and I'll introduce the research questions in a moment, but because we're not finished it, the findings that we present are quite preliminary. First of all, we want to investigate how dementia is represented in fictional language and then how readers respond. I'm the principal investigator, and my colleagues are a great crew. We have Dr. Gemma Carney and Paula Devine, who are social scientists and leaders of the ARC Aging programme based at Queen's. Carolina, who'll talk today about empathy and the reader response side of things. And our outreach officer is Jan Carson, who's a creative writer and a very successful novelist in her own right who deals with dementia. And we're also working with two dementia charities on the project. So just to give you an idea, the project's research questions, we have 3 of them. And as you can see from the timeline there, we're only part way into answering questions 2 and 3. So question 1, which I'm going to deal with first of all today, is how is dementia represented in the mind styles of fictional characters? Then questions 2 and 3, Carolina will move on to try and give a sense of how we're at least addressing those. How can real reader responses inform and develop our analyses of dementia mind styles? And number 3, how can fictional dementia mind styles promote empathy and understanding of the condition? And that's the real applied side of things, which we're still investigating. So first of all, in order to answer the first question, I began working on this during lockdown last year. And I first of all had to select the text to be included in the mind style study. These are the criteria that we used: contemporary, fictional, prose, in the English language, featuring a character with any type of dementia, and an internal perspective provided in those 2 ways. I'm not going to go into too much more detail because we're quite tight for time there. With that criteria in place, we ended up with a dementia fiction corpus of 390,000 words, and it included 12 texts of various sizes and kinds of narrator. As you can see from the list there, we have some heterogenic, some homodiegetic narrators, and a representation of male, female. So with that corpus then, I did some qualitative and quantitative analysis. First of all, qualitative. I used NVivo to code the entire corpus, and I began with the features that are commonly associated with mind styles. So I don't think this needs much of an introduction to the audience today, but things like under-lexicalization, which is very important in characters with dementia, because of course with anomic aphasia, where people with dementia will forget the word for something, then it'll be substituted for another word, and often that is done in quite interesting ways. Marked transitivity and agency patterns were also of interest. Body parts used metonymically, which seems to have something to do with agency. Pragmatic difficulties and metaphor. Also, I built on Harrison's, Chloe's 2017 findings that stimuli in the immediate environment can trigger world switches to the past. And in fact, Chloe discovered that using Elizabeth is Missing, which is one of the texts in this corpus. And also we're going to draw on a little bit today to give you an illustration of the analysis and also of some of the readers' responses to that text. But during the course of the qualitative analysis, I also noticed that there's so many more narrative level features and other features which contribute to dementia mind styles. And dramatic irony is one of those. But to give you just a quick insight into how detailed this was, if you've got 390,000 words of dementia fiction and you start to qualitatively code it, this is what came up as relevant for the mind style analysis. These are the categories that I used in NVivo. Just to draw your attention there to the narrative level. So as I said, Chloe had pointed out the significance of world switch triggers, but I find that dramatic irony was also very important because often the character would forget something that the reader might not. And that experience of reading and understanding the character's mind in a privileged position was something that was quite important for these dementia mind styles and the reader's experience of them. There's many other categories there. I don't have time to go into them all, but what's quite important as well is the reference to other discourses. This is also, if you like, a narrative level feature, but often the characters with dementia would bring in other discourses, report them, whether it was from long-term memories, whether it was snippets of song and poem, or just memories that would intersperse with the narrative. And of course, there's many other categories there, but we don't have time to go into them all. When it came to the quantitative analysis, I did a keyword analysis using the corpus that I had, but also the fiction section of the BNC, which is 14 million words. So a very big reference corpus, which had its own drawbacks, but I can talk about those in more detail later if necessary. I used a couple of cutoff points to make sure that I ended up with positive keywords that were very significant and had a large effect size. And then I went through the positive keywords and organized them according to themes. And lo and behold, the themes that came out were quite supportive of the qualitative analysis. So you'll notice that body parts were very prevalent, which has got to do with the metonymy and the agency. You'll also notice that physical descriptions were quite important. And what that meant, or my interpretation of that at least, was that often when characters lacked the name for another character because of their memory problems, they would use a physical description to describe the other characters around them. And this same kind of pattern happened with sensations. So often with characters with dementia, they find it quite difficult to process what might be happening, or at least they don't have the cognitive or memory capacity to be able to narrate fully. And so what happens is they give very rich and vivid physical descriptions of the scene and their sensations and their experience of their immediate experience. So I think that's why that's so important in the keyword analysis. Well, it's inevitable that symptoms would be represented there, but also time and age is important, and under specific reference for things. So for people, places, and things. So everywhere, person, someone, nurse, etc., rather than using the specific names for people, places, and things. So those are the kinds of things, keywords that came up in the quantitative analysis. Just to show you how that works in operation, I think I will read this little bit from Elizabeth is Missing. Now, this is drawn from an extract that we then used in our reading groups, but because we haven't got the time today, we're just going to look at the first paragraph of this extract. So I'll read it out loud and then show you how some of those categories that I pointed out are in operation. So the department I arrive in is cookware and glass. The music bouncing off the hard surfaces is so loud I can hardly think. My specs are gone and I search in my bag for the pale silk case. These second best glasses feel funny on my face and I have to keep adjusting them as I wander amongst the shelves of crockery. I can't think what I'm here for and no inspiration comes. The cut glass vases and stoneware lasagna dishes give me no clues. I stand and read out the cleaning instructions on a metal wok. Remove stubborn residues with a sponge scourer or nylon cleaning pad only. Do not use metal scourers or any abrasive cleaners. Okay, so just to give you an indication of the kinds of things that I noticed, this gives an example of how the other discourses can be represented in the narrative of characters with dementia. Here, Maud is its report of writing that is visible around her in the department store, and she reports it verbatim, seemingly without the capacity to be able to process it and understand its significance for her current situation. And the same goes for the quote at the bottom as well. And also you just get a sense of the sensory descriptions that are important to Maud. the music bouncing off hard surfaces. And the whole data set was very, very rich in sensory descriptions. In this extract, I think I can hear someone else. On this extract, you can hear that you can notice that there's memory impairment. So Maud, of course, has forgotten why she's come to the department store. For the readers of the fuller text, they will experience dramatic irony at this, because we know, having read a few paragraphs before, that she's gone to the department store to buy a jumper with her daughter. So that experience of dramatic irony seems quite important in the corpus as well. The mind style analysis that I've just summarized here and some theoretical developments are reported in full in an article that I have under review at the moment. But that was just to give you a snapshot of the qualitative and quantitative mind style analysis that then we use next in order to answer questions 2 and 3, which I'm going to let Carolina talk about now. Mm-hmm. I'll just share my screen again, Carolina, okay, and give you control, hopefully.
I think I will request control. Let's see if that works. Please bear with us.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so thank you, Jane. After Jane's analysis of the corpus of really biblical proportions, the following step in the project has been gathering responses from real readers. So in the last few years, let me see if I can, yeah. Great. In the last few years, there's been more and more interest in taking an empirical approach when it comes to analyzing the interaction between reader and text. So this growing interest in reader response research can be seen in, for example, the work that we have cited on the slides. And this means that these are very exciting times for empirical stylistics. So in our project, reader responses will allow us to examine how readers engage with characters with dementia, how the reader responses tally with the stylistic analysis, and this means we will hopefully be able to empirically test and develop the mind style model. And finally, using real readers' insights will help us evaluate the capacity for dementia fiction to foster awareness of the condition. So this is taking the format of reading groups, and we chose this format so that the study remains as naturalistic as possible, as opposed to experimental. And the idea is that the reading groups take the format of a book club, but they serve the function of a focus group. So they are being held online for obvious reasons. And now I'm going to give you a brief just run briefly through the design of the reading groups. And in terms of influence, the design follows from the pilot study that Jane and our co-investigators carried out in 2017. And then the design was further tweaked and refined later. And then on the slide, you can see other work that has influenced the design as well. So people, for me, always the most important or interesting part of a study is the participants who take part in it. So there are 4 separate reading groups with different stakeholder groups, people in the early stages of dementia, informal caregivers, trainee social workers here at Queen's, and also members from the general public from all over the UK. So participants have been recruited through different channels. For example, those with dementia and carers have been recruited through our dementia partner, Dementia Charities, and then the social work students here at this institution, and then the members of the general public through different arts organizations. And the groups are between 6 and 9 participants each, and they are balanced for gender as much as possible. So the rationale for conducting the groups separately and thus having homogeneous groups is that in the pilot study, one of the participants was a person with dementia, and the rest of the participants were listening very attentively and very respectfully to his lived experience of dementia. So some of these other participants felt that his perspective had privilege over theirs because it was lived experience. So they kind of felt that they had different rights and entitlement to talk about it, right? So briefly, the idea is that having separate groups gives each group their own space to discuss their ideas and their experience and their perspective in their own right. Okay, we can talk more about that later in the questions if you like. So then it came to selecting the extracts, and after Jane completed her corpus analysis, she selected a big number, around 50 or 60 extracts, so that we could select them and use them in the groups. We ended up selecting a total of 12, and these are the criteria. So they had to depict dementia mind styles. The texts themselves had to be dementia friendly. So we got these guidelines by the charities to make sure they were dementia friendly. I think it's a PDF for some, it's in the references, so you can follow that up if you like. And we were also very aware of participants' well-being, right? So we wanted to avoid extracts that could be too upsetting. Possibly, when possible, bring in humor and also bits of novels where the characters feel deeply loved by their relatives, right? So it doesn't always have to be upsetting stuff. Then half of them were shorter, half of them are longer. So all of the team read those 50, 60 extracts. We made comments and we agreed on which ones we would be selecting. Great. And then we're interested in effects both during reading and after reading. So on the one hand, what happens while they read? How do readers engage with the characters? How do they understand and construct their mind styles? And what stylistic features are involved in the responses? So here's an outline of what a session looks like. First, participants read the extract while listening to a pre-recorded reading of the extract with our wonderful Jan Carson. Then while reading, participants mark up the text with things they find interesting. Then immediately after that, they complete an individual questionnaire. And then we conduct a short group discussion on the extracts. And here at the bottom of the slide, you can see just an example of 3 types of questions that we include. Right, so then how about the effects after reading? This takes place over 6 weeks. So because we're interested in the long-term effects to see how the reading of dementia narratives can contribute to a greater understanding of the condition, we had to establish a baseline at the beginning, right? So before the reading groups started, we asked participants to complete 2 questionnaires. One of them was to do with their experience and knowledge of dementia, and the other was to attest the ED or interpersonal reactivity index to measure their traits or dispositional empathy. So this serves as a baseline against which we can track reader responses later on. And then each week we are tracking the development of their understanding of dementia. And then at the end, we will provide another questionnaire to check the effects of this exposure to dementia mind styles. Okay, so I think that's back to you, Jane.
Yeah. Okay, we don't have a lot of time left, so I'm just going to very quickly give you an overview on how the findings from one reading group that we've hosted might tally with the mind style analysis. So I should say that we're 4 weeks into the 6-week session, and what we're reporting on here is just readers' responses to one extract from week 1. Okay, and this doesn't include participants with dementia because they responded not by an electronic questionnaire but on a paper one, which we haven't received back yet. So just to let you know, that's what we're reporting on. The preliminary findings in relation to mind style, there's one question that I found very useful in trying to access how readers respond to a certain part of the text. So after listening to the extract and reading it, they were marking up as they went along. And the first question in the questionnaire that comes after that is, looking at the markings you made on the extract, how and why did those bits strike you? And this was very useful for getting the participants to pinpoint the textual features that they were interested in. So the ones that they were interested in, luckily enough, are also the ones that I was interested in when it came to mind style. They noticed things like the world switch triggers, so intrusive thoughts and memories arise. They noticed how Maud paid attention to pointless detail in relation to the other discourses, the reading aloud of the signs that she saw. They were very responsive in terms of the sensory descriptions. This is only a small sample of the responses of them picking up, the readers picking up on the sensations that were related to Maud and her experience. And they also noticed some of the pragmatic level elements, so I can't, and that there was a frustrating interactions. Also, I think 68% of this group could understand Maud's viewpoint considerably or completely. And in the next question, it said, well, what made you understand? And there's one response that I think gets to the heart of what we're interested in. And this participant said, I can understand her way of thinking. So this gets to what we're interested in terms of the link between viewpoint, the mind style, and perhaps empathy, or at least awareness raising. So I'm going to pass over to Carolina, who's going to talk more about those reader responses in relation to those aspects.
Yeah, so as we said, this is only a tiny bit of the data, only from one session and only for one little extract. So here I took some data from these responses, and we can see already there's loads of evidence of understanding, that they are understanding Maud, and they are attributing different mental states to the character. They agree on the majority of them, being panic, confusion, disorientation. Also, we can see evidence that participants display understanding of Maud's experience based on similarity of experience. So these are two carers, and in a nutshell, they are expressing that they can understand the character because they were in a familiar situation, and they have lived that quite closely. So yes, there is evidence of understanding. And then when it comes to empathy, that's when things become a bit more tricky. So by empathy, I mean sharing the character's perspective and mental states, just to put it very briefly. And if we look at the right of the screen, we have this question: how do you think Maud was feeling? Right, so here the word cloud gives you an idea of all the instances, what participants said, and then the bigger the word, the more frequent it is in the questionnaire answers. So you can see participants attributed different mental states: confused, overwhelmed, scared are the bigger ones. So then if you look at the left, in the questionnaire, we also include the question, can you describe the emotions you felt while reading, right? So here we can make a distinction between two categories: the responses that are similar in kind to what the character is thought to be experiencing, or what empathy scholars call affective matching. And then there are responses which are not similar in kind. So the participants feel a range of things in response to the character, but they don't have to match exactly what the character is going through. So in the first category, we can find the word empathy quite a few times. People do use it a lot. However, in my research, I always put a big question mark when participants use this word, as it doesn't necessarily mean that what they understand by empathy is exactly what you as analyst understands that to be. So you can try to look for more indirect evidence of empathetic responses. And for example, if you look at the second bullet points, I shared Maud's panic. I felt the anxiety of Maud. That, well, that's, I think it's a bit better, a bit safer, or a better instance where we can say that the reader is naming the emotional simulation more explicitly. Right, so then the final question of the research project is to do with how exposing people to dementia narratives can increase their understanding of the condition. So we have this question at the very end of the questionnaires. Did reading this extract make you think about the experience of living with dementia in a new or different way? And I'm just going to focus on the last quote because of time. It speaks to how aware we should all be when in public, that anyone you speak to could be struggling with something hidden, as well as have more education in spotting things like dementia. So different responses suggest there is an increased understanding of the condition. They start spotting things that they were not aware before. So they are more aware of the range of symptoms of dementia and what it might feel like to live with it. But as we said already, these are early days, and all we can say from this preliminary analysis is that dementia mind styles do facilitate or seem to be facilitating awareness and understanding of the condition, and then empathetic responses remain to be seen. Is that good, Jane? Do you want to add anything to that?
No, nothing to add. I think we've gone over time, so we'll leave a little bit of time for questions. Thank you.